As the Money Burns is an original podcast by Nikki Witter. Based on historical research, this is a deep exploration into what happened to a set of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes when the Great Depression hits. Each episode has 3 primary sections. Section 1 is a narrative story. Section 2 goes deeper into the historical facts. Section 3 focuses on contemporary, emotional, and personal connections. Story recap. Barbara Hutton and Doris Duke have made their big debuts, hoping for more romantic prospects. Meanwhile, others like Cobina Wright try to hide their growing financial troubles with more entertaining distractions. Now back to As the Money Burns, Millionheir. Heiresses must always fight off fortune hunters willing to break their hearts for money. But there is another heir who presents a whole other level of danger. Section 1 Story. Tuesday, February 17th, 1931. It's winter, but many are out to play in Palm Beach, Florida. After surviving the non-stop debutante season where attending 3 events a night were endless, now it's time for a bit of relaxation and recuperation. A little. There's always a function or another place where one is needed to be seen. One such place, the distinguishable shrine of gastronomy, is the popular Patio Lamaze. It is simply the best luncheon hotspot where everyone loves to gather. People lounge on the terrace while dining on beluga astrakhan caviar and enjoying entertainment like the Ziegfeld Follies or Meyer Davis Orchestra, the latter which also played at Doris Duke and Barbara Hutton's debutante balls. Founded by the famous restaurateur and hotelier George Lamaze, the Patio Lamaze is the ultimate dining experience. Only the evening before, several parties occurred. The dangerous Broadway playboy and millionaire Philip Morgan Plant entertains at one table, while Harry Winston sits at another and whose eyes obviously cannot resist a jewel gleaming across the way. Because more than any face, all eyes never miss the unmistakable Hope Diamond, glittering about the neck of its owner, Evalyn Walsh McLean, as she hosts 10, including her house guests, the tall, awkward heiress, Doris Duke, and her socially ambitious mother, Nanaline Duke. Evalyn schemes along with socialite Eva Stotesbury on a marital union between Doris and Eva's son, Jimmy Cromwell. In the 1920s glory at the Patio Lamaze, Eva faced off with her rival Mrs. Manville over the Palm Beach social scene, and won. Today at lunch, Doris returns. While her table chats on topics less interesting, Doris glances around and spots at another table none other than her friend and co-debutante, the chubby budding fashionista, Barbara Hutton. Barbara sits at a table also bored by her father, Franklyn Hutton, and stepmother Irene Hutton's banter with her cousin, Curtis Hutton's wife, Sophia, née Brownell, herself a 1924 debutante, heiress of the San Francisco Talbot's fortune, with former dreams of a Broadway acting career. Barbara keeps herself distracted by digging out the delicacies buried within a bed of crushed ice. Lamaze is a master of cold food and presentation. A huge blue flame leaps into the air as a dessert is prepared with flair. Heir to 2 fortunes and Eva's son, the handsome Jimmy Cromwell, laughs in delight as he dines with several friends. Barbara looks up and makes eye contact with Doris. The teens wait for the opportune moment and excuse themselves. In the ladies' room, the two reunite away from prying chaperones. The fact that they are out in society does not mean they are unattended, and will indeed remain under supervision until first marriage. The chaperones, of course, are to ensure the young ladies are making the right matches and staying away from scandal. The debutantes excitedly and quickly update each other. Doris tells all about the evening before and how she had a brief encounter with the dashing Phil Plant. Barbara hesitates a moment, then confesses she will be having dinner this very evening at his mother and stepfather's home. First delighted, then Doris' face slightly falls. Could it be they are in competition for the same eligible bachelor? Unfortunately, there's no time to really gab as they must rush back to their tables. That evening, Barbara Hutton joins her Aunt Jessie Woolworth Donahue and her husband, James Donahue, at the home of Colonel and Mrs. William Hayward at the Munn Villa, Luana. Countess de Frasso is among the other guests. Of course, Franklyn Hutton will not be so pleased at this social interaction involving Mrs. Hayward's son, Phil Plant, and his daughter, Barbara. An heir to his former stepfather's railroad and shipping fortune, and worth at least $25 million, the dashing millionaire has all the exciting charm of a playboy. He is recently divorced from screen actress Constance Bennett. Phil now participates in African safaris with his new stepfather, Colonel Hayward. Current stepbrother Leland Hayward is the famous theatrical agent and producer, leading to ever more access to Phil's obvious weakness. Plant always has a slew of Broadway and acting beauties surrounding him. Over a game of bridge, Phil takes an immediate liking to lovely Barbara. She can't help but blush at his attentions. Could someone like him find her beautiful? He promises to reform his bad boy ways for her, then makes her an offer that would send Franklyn into a fury. Would she be willing to join him on his yacht? Tempting and dangerous. A well-known gambler and heavy drinker, Phil also has a few broken engagements, yet that pales in comparison to his more other infamous reputation. Franklyn will never approve. However, if a similar offer is made to Doris, Nanaline might find it a far more acceptable solution to her problems in acquiring the Duke fortune, as long as her son Walker Inman stays away from Phil's stable of Broadway beauties. Nanaline barely got rid of Walker's ex-wife. Why not take a yacht or automobile ride with Phil Plant? It's a really dangerous proposition. Not only scandalous, nor pissing off your parents kind of danger, as an actual physical and even mortal danger. See, Phil is sort of well known to have accidents that gravely disfigures beauties and sometimes kills his passengers or crew. Dangers never cease to exist in the realm of the wealthy. Section 2, History and Historiography. Ever in pursuit of the facts within these winding stories, I'm never quite sure what I will come across. The Broadway playboy and millionaire heir, Phil Plant, is barely mentioned within 2 of Barbara Hutton's 4 biographies, and only 2 brief references within Doris Duke's 4 biographies, though once as in connection to Barbara Hutton, and the other his stepfather's Fifth Avenue mansion as a Duke neighbor. I first ran across his name in the Elsa Maxwell Exposé series on Barbara for Cosmopolitan circa 1938 to 1939. Thus, I really needed to do some digging. Who exactly is this mysterious beau? Well, I found quite a bit of shocking revelations and added him to my mental list. A different newspaper 1938 article series by Adela Rogers St. John's finally gave a timeline of their courtship. In a 1946 Time magazine article covering the marriages of his first wife, film actress Constance Bennett, Phil Plant is referred to as the Millionheir, as in heir, H-E-I-R. I couldn't resist that moniker. In my more recent research, I found articles linking him romantically to Doris Duke. So much to work with, and that's not even revealing the shocking parts. Oy, to revisit him now in the timeline, once again I scoured for more information and details and ran across an article for his most famous accident back in 1920. The article discusses the rise of a new form of lawsuit, personal injury. It mentions the cost of these earlier lawsuits and speculates what will happen in Plant's case since he has so much money. Born in 1901, Philip Morgan Mainwaring's parents divorced when he was 12. His father came from a family of hotel proprietors. His young mother, Sarah Maise Caldwell, 31, then turned around 2 months later in 1914 and married 62-year-old stepfather, Morton F. Plant, railroad and steamship magnate. The elder Plant formally adopted Phil and upon death in 1918 left him $15 million. In her widowhood, Maise was considered one of the wealthiest women of her time, and she once traded her Fifth Avenue mansion to Cartier for a string of perfectly matched pearls. Maise marries Colonel William Hayward in 1919. Hayward's son is theatrical agent and producer Leland Hayward, who's responsible for the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, South Pacific, and The Sound of Music. His roster of clients includes Fred Astaire, Jimmy Stewart, Ginger Rogers, Henry Fonda, Ernest Hemingway, and among clients he dated are Greta Garbo and Katharine Hepburn. Leland's daughter is actress Brooke Hayward. The Broadway playboy millionaire Phil Plant has been consistently making the papers since he was 19. Returning from the Harvard-Yale football game in November 1920, he swerves to miss two oncoming automobiles, jumps a divide, and crashes his vehicle into a tree near Hunter's Bridge in Pelham Bay. Inside with him are 4 other prep school classmates and one Miss Helen Jesmer, then known as the Greenwich Follies girl. 2 escape uninjured. Phil has a fractured leg and facial lacerations. One classmate has a fractured nose and a lacerated right eye, and another suffers contusions. But 19-year-old Helen would get the worst, having gone through the windshield. Fractures to the base of her skull, part of her scalp torn off, and the loss of most of her teeth and sight in one eye. She would spend over a year in the hospital, with multiple surgeries. It was noted that Colonel and Mrs. Hayward would visit her, but Phil soon found himself unavailable. Helen claims Phil had wanted to marry her until she was no longer beautiful. I will post her before and after photos on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. One 1920 article appears in at least 4 newspapers, including the San Francisco Examiner, Oregon Daily Journal, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Butte Miner. It is titled, "Why It's Cheaper to Kill a Pretty Girl Than to Disfigure Her." It details the potential cost of the new personal injury lawsuits, which were only the beginning of this all now far too familiar lawsuit. Death would pay out at a maximum of $5,000 versus $55,000 for hand or $40,000 for a leg injury. This case would be considered a far potentially larger settlement due to Plant's estimated wealth. In 1924, Helen would sue for her disfigurement for the sum of $500,000, but settled for $100,000. In January 1925, Phil was set to marry New York society debutante Miss Judah Smith, but just days before the wedding, he eloped with childhood friend and actress Constance Bennett in Greenwich, Connecticut. Their marriage would last until 1929, when Constance divorced him in Paris. She also hid the fact she was pregnant by him to prevent a custody battle. In the divorce, Constance would get a $1 million settlement, and Phil would return to New York and his cafe society lifestyle. Now, one might think Phil Plant would settle down in his ways. But what would be the fun in that? Nope, late in the night in June 1930, Phil collided his yacht Lolita into Otis Chatfield Taylor's yacht, Chadwin III, in middle of Long Island Sound, sending his companion film star actress Claire Windsor into the sea. The crash immediately sank the yacht, and 10 were left adrift until rescue. One of his yacht sailors drowned, and that led to another undisclosed lawsuit. And Claire narrowly escaped a similar fate when a spotlight located her for rescue. Claire unsuccessfully tried to hide under the pseudonym Mrs. Smith, but everyone recognized her. She would sue Plant as well. Phil would pay $25,000 in damage to Taylor's cook for injury and another $1,000 to John Ellsworth Hively, the captain of Taylor's craft. Less dangerous, except maybe to the arteries, Patio Lamaze is an al fresco dining restaurant built in 1927. Founder George Lamaze is from Reims, France, who immigrated to the United States at the age of 6. All-around athlete, including football at Brown University, wine boy at Café Martin, manager of the Folies Bergère, served in World War I, then returned to a long elite career in the culinary services. Lamaze excels in French sauces and has invented several dishes bearing his name: eggs Lamaze, soufflé Lamaze, flaming brochettes of chicken liver Lamaze, and many more. He is a master of cold dishes, often involving beds of crushed ice. The Patio Lamaze is a seasonal restaurant which closes when Lamaze moves on to the next location. New York, Chicago, Hollywood, Saratoga, wherever the elite travel and gather. Lamaze's first wife, Nancy Reading, is the daughter of Baltimore millionaire Michael Reading. George and Nancy married in 1913 despite her parents' protests, but later patched things up. Nancy was worth $500,000 back then. Upon their separation in 1916, George paid her $60 a week, then cut her off, and Nancy became a cashier at the Waldorf. The couple reunited within the year, but 4 years later, in 1921, divorce proceedings began. Nancy's father would again take care of her. Lamaze, too, will be romantically linked to several Broadway beauties. More intertwining tales of money, Broadway, and danger, mixed inside the glamorous world of wealth and privilege. Only don't be fooled. Nothing lasts forever, especially when it involves large sums of money. Section 3. contemporary, and personal relevance. It's easy to get caught up in the fantasy if I only had so much money, like dreaming of winning the lottery. What all we could do with unlimited supply of money. Now the real question should be, what are you willing to do to get that large sum of money? There are some who so desperately want those lifestyles presented on television, in magazines, or on Instagram, they will do whatever they can to get it. They take the fake it till you make it to an extreme. The way they make it, highly illegal and not sustainable. Of course, I'm referring to the likes featured in Netflix's Tinder Swindler and Inventing Anna. In Tinder Swindler, a con artist claiming to be the son of an Israeli diamond billionaire finds women on the popular dating app, woos them with flashes of wealth, then switches to panic and paranoia as he bilks the females into borrowing money to send to him, which he then uses to fund another romantic and dramatic courtship. As he is never interviewed, it is hard to determine his deep-seated motives other than supreme selfishness, greed, and narcissism. Inventing Anna by creator Shonda Rhimes covers the true story of the Russian immigrant who pretends to be a German heiress. Her goal is to make a mark in the world and thus the validation. She spends lavishly to get attention, then avoids payment when due. She cons hotels, friends, and associates in her attempt to build a special exclusive club. I once saw a documentary with the real Anna being interviewed, and that girl has the remorse of a sociopath, meaning almost absolutely none. There are moments when you can see her eyes glimmer with a "I fooled them" glee. Both shows are interesting to watch. It is a study on how people fake wealth, how we view the indicators of wealth, and the vulnerabilities one has when seduced by those ploys. The former Tinder Swindler marks were motivated as much by love and romance as wealth, and the latter Inventing Anna marks seduced by greed, envy, and good old FOMO, the fear of missing out. Those above are the same motivations faced by the people in our stories, who are struggling with the changing identities and circumstances caused by the Great Depression. What would make you most vulnerable to being conned? We all have our vulnerabilities and weaknesses. The biggest vulnerability is if you think you don't have one. Even if you're immune most of the time, always be aware we all have moments of vulnerability. With the best con artists, you won't ever know you've been taken. Last note about the dangers of wealth. While fact-checking the new names mentioned in today's episode, I uncovered a 1970s triple homicide in relation to one of the main fortunes. The unsolved murders were likely an attempt to gain an inheritance. I won't cover them for the moment, as this episode is already too overladen with details, and that crime requires far more investigation. But I will point out it involves someone living far beyond their means and getting desperate in the end. Alas, there is always danger when it comes to extreme wealth. It's the time of year when we celebrate the United States presidents with both Lincoln and Washington's birthdays. For those more interested in learning presidential history, I would like to recommend the podcast Presidencies of the United States by Jerry Landry. Jerry provides deep dives across multiple episodes into each presidency. Want to know more? Here's a promo for his podcast.
Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Lincoln. Those names are well known throughout the world. But what about Timothy Pickering, Ona Judge, or James Wilkinson? How much does the public truly know about Jay's Treaty, Gabriel's Rebellion, or the Chesapeake Leopard Affair? My name is Jerry Landry, and on my podcast, The Presidencies of the United States, I take the audience on a deep dive into presidential history in order to better understand the people and events that, while not as well known, helped to build the world of the modern era. The history of the American presidency is not just about the one person holding the office at any given time. For better or worse, it takes a village to make an administration. The Presidencies of the United States can be found anywhere fine podcasts can be found. Or you can go to the website at presidencies.blueberry, that's BLUBRRY.com, to start listening. Be sure to follow Presidencies on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to join in the conversation. Thanks, and I'll see you on the journey through history.
Next, when we return to As the Money Burns, many are talented and can do some pretty amazing things, but there is one trick that only a very few can do. believe it or not. Until then. As the Money Burns is an original podcast written, produced, and voiced by Nikki Woodard based on historical research. Archival music has been provided by Past Perfect Vintage Music. Check out their website at www.pastperfect.com. Please come visit us at As the Money Burns via GoodPods, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Transcripts, timeline, episode guide, and character bios are available at asthemoneyburns.com.